Hey everybody, let's get off the main line today and do some switching at the paper plant. We'll start with a quick overview of the facility here. Two tracks on the back left, inbound and outbound chemicals in tanks. Right-hand track is inbound covered hoppers. And then on the north side of the building here, we have outbound finished product, 5 doors for boxcars. The south side of the building has a track that leads to wood chip receiving. And on the east side of the building here is shipping and receiving for truck traffic. This is obviously the early mock-up stages of this. I don't have the scenery work done on the level above, and I don't want any crap raining down on anything that I've got finished here. Traffic for the industry comes from both ends of the layout. Wood chips are going to come in from the west end on a road switcher, and all the rest of the traffic comes from Fort McLeod on what we call the paper plant turn or the Brocket rocket. The switching itself in the plant is done by that plant switcher, little GMD one in the background. Just to the east of the buildings itself is a 4-track yard. Each track's about 7 feet long, and this is where inbound trains are broken down and outbounds are built. I use a very simplified car card system representing single cars, pairs of cars, or blocks of cars. Each car card will have the reporting mark, the road number, the type of car, and the color of the car. In the case of a block, you have 4 cars. These are all the same color, all the same reporting mark. And on the left here, we have 2 tank cars. One's black with a horizontal orange stripe. The coloring just makes it easy to pick the cars out of the consist. Each card has 2 or 3 turns, and these ones are going to Lethbridge, which is east staging. There's a spot in the paper plant itself as well, and the odd car will have an off spot in the paper plant yard, just to add some interest to the operation. After the plant switcher crew has checked all their cards and located all the outbound traffic, they're going to roll west down the lead here and grab any empty chip racks that are going west across the system. Chip racks tend to be stuffed onto the back of Lenny. That's a Lethbridge Nelson road switcher. It's the train that leaves right after the paper plant turn. Paper plant turn is already en route to the plant itself here. The crew on the plant switcher will drag the empty chip racks down the lead into the yard and set them on the east end. They'll then proceed east onto the lead that goes out to the east switch at Cowley. They're going to grab loads that were set out the previous op session by Nelly. Nelly is what we call the Nelson to Lethbridge road switcher, and these cars originated in West End staging. Once the crew's cleared the west end of the ladder, they'll back those loads down onto track 1 and spot them in receiving later on during the op session. Tracks are laid out really simply here, 1, 2, 3, 4 from back to front. The whole plant itself is laid out simple. The town side of Cowley is right on prairie just before entering valley and getting into the mountains, so they have lots of real estate to work for. They wouldn't overcomplicate the trackage. I'm kind of revising history a little bit. There was never a paper plant at Cowley. There was a Johnson's Brothers lumber mill from 61 to 81. In the mid-80s, the Old Man River Dam was completed and formed the reservoir just outside of Cowley. The paper plant decided with access to that water, it would be feasible to use the old Johnson's Brothers site for construction of their new paper plant, and that's where we are today. While that plant switcher's taking care of everything, we'll just check in with the paper plant turn. Left Fort McLeod about 15 minutes ago, just rolling across the Castle River here. It's about an average sized train going in and out of the paper plant. It can range anywhere from 12 to 20 cars. With their time-sensitive work out of the way, the crew now turns their attention to building the outbound train, picking loads and empties up from various spots on the north side of the building. The paper plant turn is just rolling into track 3 at Cowley here. They'll pull clear of the east end of the ladder. If they have to double things over, they will. They have to make a runaround move and tie onto those empty chip racks that were drug out by the plant switcher at the beginning of the op session here. This crew is responsible for getting those tied onto the tail end of Lenny when it arrives at East Cowley. The crew of the plant switchers lifted all the boxcar loads out of the north side of the building. They're going to just roll up and talk to the crew of the turn here. The turn will give them the paperwork for their inbound traffic and let them know if there's any stuff that has to go back east. A lot of times there'll be extra traffic on here that has to be switched out into Pincher. With plans made between the two crews, the plant switcher will go and finish picking up any outbound traffic. The turn can now make his runaround move and go down and tie on to those empty chip racks on track 1. There's 2 scenarios with these empty chip racks. Because we're running a turn out of Fort Macleod today, they can be responsible for tying onto the empties and stuffing them onto the back of Lenny. If for whatever reason this turn doesn't run, then Lenny would arrive at Cowley. That crew would have to run around their own train and pick these empties up off the lead. So the plant switcher would therefore have to pull the loads first, run around, stuff these empties down the lead and leave them where the loads were so that Lenny can work them onto their own train. Plant switcher is still going about its business, trying to get the rest of the train made up, just lifting the rest of the outbound traffic. 1 set of tanks has been pulled. The crews tend to always separate the 2 blocks of tank cars, so in this instance they're going to use those covered hoppers as a buffer between the 2 blocks. One thing I really dig about the paper plant is the variety of traffic both in and outbound. Obviously you've got your outbound finished product in these boxcars, you've got tanks in, you've got tanks out, you've got covered hoppers in. I'd love to see a sodium chlorate car, wood chips of course. Every once in a while I'll even throw old boxcars on the paper plant turn inbound that have product to be recycled. Of course, the east end of the building allows me to show off some of the cool truck models that are becoming available. That turquoise flat top 379 in the background is pretty close to what I drove before I decided to stay home with my son. So I'm likely going to end up modifying that. I'll put some straight pipes on it, some different fenders on the back end, and kind of remind me of what I used to do way back when. Lenny's just arriving at the east switch at Cowley. He's going to pull clear on the siding here, and then our turn can make its move and tie those racks onto the tail end. Lenny's rolled down towards the west end of the siding here at Cowley. We are now able to come out of the spur switch and make our move. Now, if you couldn't do this within the confines of the siding, if you had to foul main track, you'd have to ask for a work between from RTC to make this happen. We should be okay today though. The turn's conductor will have ridden the point to a safety stop here, hop down, pull the Fred off the tail end car on Lenny, throw it in the ballast, then call the paper plant turn back to a joint. The paper plant turn's power will then cut off and return to the spur track for the paper plant itself. The conductor will call Lenny ahead until the tail end car is even with where he's dropped that Fred in the ballast. He'll then affix the Fred to the back coupler on the last car. Lenny will make sure that he's got telemetry and that he's reading pressure back there. He'll get a warrant and he can proceed up the hill. This is a good place for the power for the turn to just sit and wait things out while the plant switcher gets their outbound train made up. Plant switcher has a little bit more monkeying around to do. These 2 SRY boxcars are both carded for Lethbridge, so they have to go onto the outbound train as well. They were in the off-spot position in the yard. So the crew is determined that they're going to use them for tail end cars, grab the van, and shove them west into the yard, clear the west ladder, so that they can just back the remaining outbound traffic down onto them. The TTX boxcar here is also an off spot from the op session prior. However, it's destined and carted for the paper plant itself. So it's going to be doubled over onto the inbound traffic and switched out at the crew's convenience. The opposite end of this block has two cars that came in on the turn that are destined for pincher. So the crew will tie everything together here. They're going to pull that out and they're going to stuff those two cars destined for pincher over onto track 4 on the head end of the outbound traffic. That will allow the paper plant turn on its way back towards Fort Macleod to stop in at pincher, and it'll be a nice trailing point movement right off the head end. They can set those two cars out, pick up any traffic there that they need to, and continue on to Fort Macleod. After tying that pincher traffic onto the head end of the outbound train, plant switch will continue pushing back and grab those two cars we set off the west end of the ladder along with the van, and the outbound train is now ready to rock and roll. I'm going to pull the inbound traffic clear the east end of the yard and then back clear on track number 3. The crew for the paper plant turn can now run into track 4, grab their train, do an air test, and they're going to pull everything forward. They'll converse with the crew of the plant switcher, make sure that they have all the car cards for the cars that they have in consist, and they're ready to head back to Fort Macleod. Of course, if the crews want, they can take a coffee at this time, grab some water, whatever they need to do, and that basically concludes part 1 of the paper plant switcher. Part 2, we'll go over stuffing cars into the various spots, and we'll follow the turn back to pincher and on to Fort Macleod. That's a wrap on this one. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.